March 30th, the chief priests. Luke chapter 20, verses 1 through 8. One day, as Jesus was teaching the people in the temple and preaching the gospel, the chief priests and the scribes with the elders came up and said to him, "Tell us by what authority you do these things, or who is it that gave you this authority?" He answered them, "I also will ask you a question. Now tell me, was the baptism of John from heaven or from man?" And they discussed it with one another, saying, "If we say from heaven, he will say, 'Why did you not believe him?' But if we say from man, all the people will stone us to death, for they are convinced that John was a prophet." So they answered that they did not know where it came from. And Jesus said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things." WWJD. Do these letters ring a bell? Perhaps you remember those bracelets with the words, "What would Jesus do?" To tell the truth, that isn't always the best question to ask, because you're not Jesus. But as we consider this passage, it really is helpful. It is now the last week of Jesus' earthly life. He's in Jerusalem. Each day he goes up to the temple. The crowds gather round and he teaches them, preaching the gospel. But look, here come the chief priests and their retinue, presumably including Annas and his son-in-law, the current high priest, Caiaphas. The crowds must have parted like the Red Sea in Moses' day. Nobody becomes a religious leader without a presence, whether attractive or otherwise. In this case, it is undoubtedly the latter. Annas had been deposed from the high priesthood by Rome, and Caiaphas was appointed in his place. Hardly a shrewd decision, you would have thought, not least since the Jewish people continued to recognize the father-in-law as the true high priest. And doubtless he continued to be the power behind the high priesthood. But look again at the scene Luke is painting. On the one hand, see these two men, probably distinguished by their clothing, surrounded by their sycophantic entourage, marching up to Jesus, the carpenter of Nazareth in the Northlands. Listen to their intimidating demand. "What authority do you have to be teaching here? Who gave it to you?" In their minds, the answers are no authority at all, and nobody, you just took it. Watch Jesus and listen to what he says. We've already seen the wisdom of the adage, why does a rabbi always answer a question with a question? Answer, why not? Notice again how Jesus responds. It has a lesson to teach us. First, Jesus is asked a very direct question. Second, Jesus does not give a direct answer. Third, instead, Jesus asks a question of his own. That second point will surprise a Christian who believes that faithful witnesses always answer every question they are asked and do so as directly and as fully as possible. After all, isn't that what 1 Peter 3:15 implies? Giving reason for the hope that we have? Apparently, Jesus didn't think so. Perhaps he was thinking of Proverbs 26:4 and 5. Answer a fool according to his folly, and don't answer a fool according to his folly. Once again, we see that Jesus didn't answer questions, he answered the questioner. Sometimes there is a big difference. The chief priests were trying to make Jesus incriminate himself. They didn't expect him to respond with a question they couldn't answer without incriminating themselves. His question revealed their false motives, their sinful hearts, and their inconsistency. How the crowd must have loved seeing the chief priests speechless for once. What is the takeaway for us from this interchange? Well, first it is to admire Jesus. But then we need to learn how to imitate him. Jesus didn't cast his pearls before pigs, who would trample them and him. He taught us not to make that mistake either. Matthew 7:6. We need to learn to recognize pigs, wolves, and false sheep, and deceptive and deceitful inquisitors. We must listen to questioners, not just their questions. Rather than fall into their verbal traps, we need to learn how to respond in a way that silences them in their inconsistency. So always ask yourself not only, what is the answer to the question, but also, why is this person asking it? In other words, what would Jesus do? Today's reflection. Do you know people who try to entrap you as a Christian? How can Jesus' example help you?
This devotional series is being produced with the kind permission of the Good Book Company. A link to the book To Seek and to Save by Sinclair Ferguson can be found in the description below.